My next guest is Wilma Wallace. She's the Chief Diversity and Social Impact Officer at REI Co-op. She oversees REI's enterprise-wide racial equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives and serves as the company's Chief Legal Officer as well. I was out at REI in Seattle a week and a half ago. It was way cool. I love it. It's like one of my go-to tourist, it's a destination experience. Wilma, it's great to see you, and thanks so much for joining us. Hey, look, I've asked this, all the time. We're kind of discuss different dimensions of ESG. Look, we've just gone through a very tough. It's more than a year and a half. I've been doing forums about the divides in this country, the lack of diversity and inclusion, the economic tension, the impact of COVID, where you see COVID making clear the uneven health outcomes for different communities in this country. So diversity and inclusion, in the corporate space or whatever, is so important. But there are real lives kind of connected to this conversation. I just want to make it clear it's a deep issue for me. So when you are in your kind of role, and you're basically, people know REI and they're looking at it, what are the things you're implementing that stand out, that others can replicate and copy? Because, and I'm just going to be very honest, I'm giving my own opinion here. Not everyone is doing what you're doing. A lot of them have the officers, and unfortunately they're fig leaves, and there's not a lot of action going on. So I'm just interested in how you take this world and make it real and replicable for others. Well,
Thank you, Steve, just for recognizing the commitment, that REI has to really making a difference. And I think it's important to also understand that REI is a cooperative, right? So as a cooperative, we're actually able to focus on the long-term health of an organization. And unlike a lot of public companies, are uniquely positioned to be able to actually drive change in what we believe is a meaningful way. As you just articulated, is one of the most complex issues facing society. And so we look at our governing principles, again, as a cooperative, as giving us permission and actually the mandate to ensure that we're addressing inequities in society, and that we're promoting our mission, which is to inspire and enable a life outside for all. So we have undertaken over the past year a extended effort to engage internally, reflect internally on our own connections to bias, our own connections to systemic racism and other systems in society, and certainly in REI, that may prevent what we believe is a human right, which is the right to time outside, and the right to time outside in particular for communities of color and other marginalized communities, which have been left out of the conversation in a way that people traditionally think about the outdoors, and certainly the outdoors industry. And I think, like for many companies, the murder of George Floyd was a reawakening for us. And those disparities and the level of marginalization. And we knew we had to stand up and do something, or stand down and sit still.
I have a really big worry, Wilma, and I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong that, we've George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, many, many other incidents of names we don't know on the tip of our tongue. But the fear I have is that we will get to a point where we get back to the comfort of amnesia about this, that we didn't move and do the kinds of things that need to be done. But, I think that one of the things I've realized in talking to communities, particularly people representing communities of color, is that, say, in the health space, they don't see people like themselves as doctors, that the proportion of people of color in the health and medical profession is not where it should be in terms of diversity and inclusion. And I'm just interested in the outdoors industry too. When you come in, if I were to go out to, say, Baltimore, and go hang out with some young people who love the outdoors, who would love this, but yet when they look at this sport, they may see, we don't see people like ourselves. What should we be thinking early on about experience and children, and making sure that pathway, so that they know that they're as welcome in an REI world as and I know they are, but other outdoors professions, if you will. Does that make sense? Am I asking this the right way?
No, absolutely. Sometimes you can't envision a space where you don't see yourself already. Right. And so a part of our diversity strategies is there are four major streams of work that we're focused on. One is diversifying those stories and who actually accesses the outdoors. So we're using our digital and marketing channels to bring forward those types of images of people who actually do look like me, people who are people of color, using the outdoors, maybe differently than has been traditionally used. And those voices and those ways of accessing the outdoors have been silenced or underrepresented. So at times, even the co-op has had a very traditional view of depicting the outdoors as something to be tamed or something to be conquered. And many communities, including communities of color, don't engage with the outdoors in that way. There may be more health-oriented or community-oriented or spiritual-oriented motivations for being outdoors. So we're finding, different communities and different intersections of people find meaning differently. And we need to highlight those stories, whether it be in our film studio, podcasts, editorial studios, or our marketing.
You are part of the leadership team at REI. You're their lawyer. But I'm interested in any place, being introspective, as you said, and thinking about it, and you lay out the future in the diversity inclusion space for your cooperative. What are some of the goals you and your colleagues have?
So, as I mentioned, one is diversifying the stories and talent that represent the outdoors. Another one is diversifying our supplier base. So which has traditionally been very white, currently only about 1% of retail brands in the outdoor industry are owned or led by people of color. And so earlier this year, we launched Path Ahead Ventures, which is a $30 million investment that we're making to empower founders of color in the outdoor industry to be successful. We also have a goal of enabling these 300 Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and Asian American and Pacific Islanders who are entrepreneurs to be able to cultivate and be a meaningful part of the outdoor industry. And then we've also committed to bringing on in excess of 200 other suppliers in our vendor base.
I'm going to ask you a complex question, and folks, I may not get this out right, but I am, somebody who believes very strongly against typecasting. If I want to talk to a member of Congress, though, and I do regularly, and we're talking about diversity and inclusion, we often bring in people of color. I want to bring in, someone who is white, who's privileged, and say, what is your commitment to diversity and inclusion? What is, how does this matter to you? What are the allies? What are the folks in there? Because it should be a priority for everyone. And I'm just interested in your industry because I've done a lot of programs in Silicon Valley, a lot with high-tech companies, and there, when we have conversations on diversity inclusion with the chief diversity inclusion officers, those are the most diverse crowds they are. But if you have okay, we're going to talk about programmers, or we're going to talk about, broadband, that diversity disappears. What are we doing with the challenge of making sure that corporate leadership or that co-op leadership or wherever it may be is not dependent on a person of color being responsible for delivering diversity and inclusion? Maybe that's a bit controversial, but I just sort of feel like that has to be discussed.
No, that's always the fear, right? That the people of color are the ones who are left to solve a problem that, frankly, is not ours to solve. And we've made it very, very clear throughout the co-op, particularly over the past year, where we've been immersed in, again, serious reflection as a leadership team. And we're cascading that through the organization all the way down to, the green vests that were in the Seattle store when you were there, earlier this week. But we're engaging in reflection, self-study, examination, and accountability that everyone in the co-op needs to own our efforts to become an inclusive, multicultural, anti-racist organization. And it's going to require individual self-study, individual reckoning with your own connection to race and privilege. And that is work that we committed to take on over a year ago and continue to push on.
Well, listen, next time I'm in Seattle, I'm going to call you and then maybe you can show me the other parts of the cool place. It's really one of the most wonderful spots I know of. Wilma Wallace, Chief Diversity and Social Impact Officer at REI Co-op. Really appreciate your candor and thoughtfulness. These are very important issues, and really appreciate you joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed the time.